box. And the way question will begin, obviously ask whatever you like at the moment. We've got a Q&A towards the end of the webinar. So basically I'll be moderating those questions. So just put them in the chat. And if we've got time, I'll get to them all, but we'll be doing what we sort of can with that. And also to stay with us throughout the webinar and enjoy. We've got a special announcement at the end that hopefully a few people on the call will really enjoy, but obviously it just talks a little bit about some more partnerships and some of the things that we've been up to. So before I kick off, I'll go to the next one. Yeah, before we actually go, I'd like to do the acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people who are the traditional custodians of this land. I would also like to pay the respects to the elders, both past and present, of the Kulin Nation, and extend our respect to the Indigenous Australians present. I'd like to kick it off and go now. Before any further ado, I'd like to hand over to Roger. And when we do that, basically a little while ago, Roger and I crossed paths, had a really good conversation. It went for about an hour. We talked about some really in-depth things around the circular economy and some really cool stuff that he's up to. And I thought, obviously, we're kicking off this webinar series around partnerships. I thought it'd be a really, really good idea to bring him in for the first one, so we can, so we can sort of kick it off with a good launch pad and also introduce other people into what they're doing. So, I'll hand it over to you, Roger. If you'd like, please go ahead and share your screen. I will stop sharing so you can do yours.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? I'll assume
Perfect.
I saw some thumbs,
Gotcha.
so I'll assume that's yes. So thanks Cam and Aspire team and everyone for joining this webinar. I'm joining you from Balmain, which is Gadigal land, so I also pass my acknowledgements to elders past, present and emerging. And let me tell you a little bit about C2Zero and about the way we can partner with Aspire and with all your other businesses. So C2Zero is a business that enables you to turn carbon into a value add for yourselves and for the environment. And the way that we look at this is really by saying, reducing emissions means direct action as first and as much as possible, as quickly as possible. So anything you can do directly is going to be the priority. Anything you can do which reuses, recycles, which works towards what Aspire is doing is the priority. But most of us, once we've done as much as we can, we've got something left over, and that's either because we can't avoid it, we've got to use power from utilities and others, we've got to use fuel, we've got to travel, we've got to do a whole lot of things. So how do we deal with what's left over? And I'll talk a little bit about that, because the traditional approach is to manage that bit using offsets. We've got a novel way of doing it, which doesn't rely on offsets, but is very complementary. So what we're doing at C2Zero is trying to allow you to manage your unavoidable emissions, but to do it in a way that is not necessarily going to be a cost to your business, but rather a value add and something that will keep you out of the territory of greenwashing. And that solution we call carbon cancellation, and that allows you to prevent emissions from some of the world's largest polluters, not offset, but actually prevent. I'll explain that later. By doing that, you can manage your unavoidable emissions in a way that becomes a value add for yourself and for your business, and you can use it as an ingredient which you bake into your goods, your services and activities to increase your margins, make your products more desirable, and we can add gamification to that to actually draw your stakeholders and your customers in. Rather than talk a bit about it, I'll go through a couple of case studies first, and then I'll explain how we work. And if you have any questions, please just drop them into the chat, and I'll be happy to engage and to answer those at the end. So in 2022, MasterCard brought C2Zero into the Australian Open, and they brought us in to compensate, that's MasterCard's term, they don't use the word offsetting, for the carbon in their beverages that they served in their VIP hospitality venue. So what happened was they did a measurement. They decided to go 2 times the footprint of the food and beverages, and they used C2Zero, and they used us in a way that attendees could scan QR codes, could see the impact of what they were doing, and it turned into a very, very sort of nice experience for the participants, for us, and for the environment. TEDx Sydney, similarly, in Australia, each one of us has a carbon footprint of 55 kilograms per day. Of that 55, 21 is a baseline. That's before we travel, before we do anything, or before we look at the scope 3 emissions that we export. And so TEDx effectively locked away 21 kilograms for each attendee at their flagship event. And then attendees were able to top up at the event to 55, their full day's footprint or more. And this was done with messaging and collateral around the venue, on the volunteers' T-shirts and things like that. So it made sustainability very visible. It made it part of the event and ended up with a positive impact. Similarly, Little Marionette, a Sydney coffee brand, at some of their events and promotions, they embed carbon or carbon cancellation into the cups of coffee or the bags of coffee beans that they deliver, and they can get impact and engagement that way. And the last one I'll show you is Park, a Melbourne-based company that makes footballs and football gear, and what they do is they give away one football to a disadvantaged community with each one that is purchased, and they lock away 5 kilograms of carbon, which is slightly more than the carbon footprint that goes into the manufacture of those balls with each one they sell. So I'll jump back now into, I've got plenty more case studies, but I'll jump back more now into how it works. So C2Zero is a business that sits between the regulated carbon markets, government regulated emissions markets, and I'll give you a little bit more information on those, and our customers. And so what we do is we buy emissions allowances, which are effectively permits to pollute that big polluters are mandatorily forced to buy and surrender when they pollute. So we buy those same emissions allowances that the big polluters do in the institutional markets. We lock those away in a trust where they can only be held or cancelled. They can never, ever re-enter the system, and so they're never used to pollute. And because the number of allowances is fixed, it's a capped pool. The more that we buy and cancel, the less available for polluters. That has the effect of decreasing the cap on pollution, pushing the price that it costs those polluters to do their activities, so they're incentivized to transition and to move away from polluting. And once we have those locked away and cancel carbon, we can create unique certificates that are linked to every last gram of carbon, and those can be cut into bite-sized pieces, which can be digitally or physically attached to your goods, your services, and your activities. So you saw the examples in some of the case studies. We also create certificates which at events they give speakers a ton of carbon or something as a gift for speaking, or you can lock away every time a six is hit at the cricket, the sponsor could pay for a ton of carbon to be locked away. It could be put up on screens and gamified. The heart of our business is really making sure that there's full transparency, traceability, and provenance. And to do that, we only work in regulated carbon markets where there is a transparent price, an open register, and a government-regulated financial product. And that means that if you look on the left, that's a certificate that we produce, and on the right is the registry certificate, which is the ultimate source of truth. So even if C2Zero were to disappear or were not in the loop, you could go into the registry and you could see the certificate and the carbon that has been locked away and cancelled. Just digressing a little bit, I've talked about emissions allowances, and I've said we don't use offsets. As I mentioned just very quickly, emissions allowances are government-regulated instruments equivalent to a ton of carbon. Certain big polluters, the very biggest, so the energy generators and some of the utilities and transport companies, must buy and surrender allowances to cover their polluting. The pools are capped and finite, and market participants, the regulators encourage a market which enables the polluters to both manage their current and forward price risk, but it also allows participants to buy and sell allowances just as you would in a commodities market. So For the polluters, no allowance means no pollution. So that the pool allows a price to be set, and if the price is high enough, it will incentivize those polluters to invest in stopping polluting and changing their activities rather than polluting, which will ultimately speed up the energy transition. Why is cancellation different from offsetting? I draw pictures to explain things to myself, but sometimes it's better, 1,000 words and all of that. So you can see if you're emitting a ton of carbon, at the bottom you've got two net zero scenarios. One is an offset, one is a stop. They both, as I say, net zero, but which is the more stable and which is the solution that we wish to move towards as much as possible. So it's different from offsetting in that it prevents future emissions by some of the world's largest polluters. So if the polluters, each permit we buy, we're stopping a polluter from emitting. Offsetting removes, reduces, or avoids potential future damage to the environment, or reverses damage that has already been done. Just in a nutshell, we buy and cancel the allowances without polluting, and to reiterate, that just reduces the capacity of polluters and the ultimate cap on pollution. C2Zero has been operating in Australia since 2021. It's a very small scale at the moment. We're just starting our sort of expansion journey and partnerships and things like that. We've got customers across a number of different sectors. Events has been one in which we're particularly strong, but we can work with other consumer goods, financial services, or just with businesses in general. And we focus on this sort of novel and creative deployment, which gives the businesses a scope for gamification and amplification rather than just ticking a box, buying carbon and ticking a box. And we launched in London in March this year, supported by the Lord Mayor of London. It's been, we were identified as an innovative business that aligns with the objectives of the city and of London's net zero ambitions. How can you use carbon cancellation? So as an individual, you can just neutralize the emissions that you can't avoid. So if you take it, taking a train to an event or whatever, you can just neutralize it. You can use it as a gift, so give people carbon, and that we've got customers doing. More importantly, as a business, you can use us just to neutralize your operating emissions, just as you would use an offset. You can use it for specific emissions, and you can use the sort of the gamification and amplification to show the impact. So events or activities. You can use us to engage your stakeholders, because instead of just buying carbon at the top corporate level, you're able to push it down into each goods or services or activities you do. And that will also allow businesses to increase their own margins and to distinguish themselves from their competitors and differentiate in this environment where people are looking for sustainability as part of their purchases. As I say, we emphasize the fact that you can build carbon cancellation into your products and surfaces, and we also like to talk about going beyond neutral. So turn carbon into an ingredient in your products, and the example is with the t-shirts. We've done, carbon footprint of a typical t-shirt is around 5 or 6 kilograms. So you can embed 5 or 6 kilograms into a t-shirt. That doesn't really interfere with the pricing and the margins, because it's a fairly low cost. But imagine if the carbon became part of the item that you were selling, and we've had t-shirts with a ton of carbon made as a limited edition. They become collectible. People want to own them, because not just because it's a t-shirt, but because it's a t-shirt with that gigantic impact. And the seller can use that in their product to enhance their own margins. So how do you get involved? I would say, most important thing, reach out and talk to us or connect on LinkedIn. But you can add us, you can buy certificates just to cancel carbon, or you can incorporate us into your products, services, and activities. And we're always looking for ways to design something impactful, creative, push the limits and make it much more interesting. And we're very excited now that we can start embedding carbon into the circular journey with Aspire. So I'm going to leave it there, but I'm very, very happy to answer questions, and please also reach out. I would be very happy to have further discussions and provide demonstrations and see how we can work together. Thanks. I'll stop sharing now and pass it on to Niels.
Before, just one sec, Roger, before we sort of hand over Niels, I've got just a couple of questions. Like for an example, obviously we get a lot of people, because obviously Australia's a long way away from anywhere else. We get a lot of touring acts, and as you know, recently we've just had Taylor Swift obviously in the country. I know there was a lot of backlash regarding about the amount of carbon that was used obviously for traveling around Australia and all her all the touring gear that she had, so to speak. Do you think it would be a good idea, or be something along the lines of the way that I would sort of look at it is like all the Swifties or Taylor could, possibly offset that by providing that with ticket sales or something along those lines? So that would be, something you would look at as an example.
Yeah, so you could do something with ticket sales, and we did some analysis with U2 at Wembley Stadium, and I think for less than £1 per ticket, you can basically negate the emissions of the band, their touring, and the stadium. But the thing I think is more interesting is not that. Imagine if Taylor stood up on stage with a T-shirt saying, I've locked away a ton of carbon. There's 50,000 people in the auditorium. She can sell that T-shirt for $100 or $150, and one event, instead of just washing its face with its footprint, could do 50,000 tons of carbon. That's that's getting onto numbers which will be noticed. So yes, she can just compensate for her impact, but she could really go well beyond. And I think she should message, I've come out on my private jet, I've done all this emission, but look what we can do. We can go 10 times what we've put up into the atmosphere.
Yeah, interesting. That's actually quite interesting. I didn't sort of think of it that way, but obviously I'm digressing a little bit. But however, I know a couple of promoters that are really, a lot of the people that they bring out to the country, they're very conscious of it. They're looking at different ways to do it. So maybe a conversation will pick up probably after this webinar, Roger. But anyway, we can have a look and see what we can do sort of after that, which is good. So anyway, without further ado, I'll hand over to Niels. So for those who don't know, Niels has been with us now for over a year, probably a long time, over a year now. So, but obviously Niels looks after our partnerships, and I've just got to bring him on to talk a little bit about Aspire, what we've been doing, some of the new sort of things we've been up to, and some of the reporting. So over to you, Niels. And after this section, we'll go to a Q&A session. I've already seen a handful of questions come through. So basically what we'll do is we'll get to them, we'll address them in the last part of it. And also too, I might ask you to unmute yourself and jump in and answer the question, or we'll go from there, but we'll see how we go. But over to you, Niels.
Fantastic. Thank you, Cam. And yeah, great presentation, Roger. Lots of opportunity there, mate. So very, very excited to be partnering with you. And I think it's the start of something very, very prosperous. So yeah, looking forward to it. Yes, as
Likewise,
Cam said,
thanks.
you're welcome, mate. Yeah, like Cam said, I'm been with Aspire for just over a year. I have a keen passion for all things partnerships, so hence why we're here today, garnering new relationships and building out our network and ecosystem, and hopefully inviting some more people into that as well. So yes, I'm from Aspire, and I'm talking today a little bit about who we are. Most of you on the call today know who we are, but we are going to speak a little bit about the product, the platform, a little bit of our history, and then obviously how our partnerships work as well. So moving on to the next slide. So Aspire was founded 10 years ago by C2Zero and Data61. It was pioneered by Dr. Sarah King, who was a champion in the circular economy space. She wanted to design a platform that basically enabled B2B transactions where you could reuse, repurpose, potentially even recycle resources in a very circular space, that was safe and that also reported on the data. So you could capture obviously your CO2 emissions, you can reduce your landfill, you can look to the cost reduction, revenue generation, and so forth. So that was the brainchild that started about 10 years ago. And lucky enough for us, we had Cameron that came into the fray about 5 years ago, our CEO, to bring it into commercial operations. And we've sort of skyrocketed since. So we've now sitting with over 32 LGAs. We've got over 4,500 customers, and we've got a really, really expansive and aggressive plan that we're working on. And then, of course, partnerships are a large part of that. So the way in which the platform works, it's a tool that obviously helps reduce your costs. It creates new supply chains. Like I said, it saves on your CO2 emissions. We're aligned with your ESG and reporting, and we report on your CO2 avoidance. So ISO verified to do so. We've got over 200 commodities, and we've got a lot of substrates of those as well. We're constantly building out the commodities and the resources that are exchanging. And we tend to get all these weird and wonderful ones that we think, oh my gosh, how are these going to exchange? But 9 times out of 10, they do. So the way in which the platform works is an algorithm in it that matches supply and demand and helps obviously with that, your supply and demand chains. And there's also a team that's tasked to go into market to assist with the marrying up of your supply and demand so that we can assist with your procurement. The way in which the platform looks is this is our ecosystem dashboard. So you can get an overview of how the Aspire Plus component of our platform works, which is a retrospective carbon footprint calculator. So you can actually look at something and calculate what the CO2 emission avoidance might be. You can get certification on it, and you can do that retrospectively for up to 12 months as well. So it's a really good tool. On the left-hand side, you'll see a little bit of a drop-down menu, so you can have a look at the dashboard, our marketplace, resources, matches, admin, ecosystem reports, and Aspire Plus. We won't go into too much of that today because most of you are aware of it, but yeah, very cumbersome and very sticky product that we've built out and we're very proud of. In regards to the landfill levy savings, this is a new feature we've just incorporated. It's pertinent to your geographic location. So it'll tell you exactly what the landfill levy savings are in you exchanging a resource as opposed to pushing it to landfill or dumping it. Like we said, we've got your ISO verification on your emission savings, which gives you embodied carbon and transportation, both month to month and fin year. We've got your resource in tons, the resource exchange, and the revenue. So what a lot of businesses and large enterprise and government customers of ours do, they'll actually display this in their head office, or they'll have this in their billboard, so they can see that ticking over in a live capacity, and it really fosters a little bit of organic uptake and engagement, and helps with the project's oversight as well. This is a little bit about our overview and impact. So like I was alluding to before, we've got over 4,000 customers, closer to 4,500. We've got savings of 5.1 million plus to local businesses, SME and large enterprise. We've saved over 670,000 kilotons in resources and a savings of $8.7 million in landfill levies. So yeah, we're very proud of what we've achieved, but it's all, kudos to the small businesses that are getting involved and obviously local government that's pioneering this as well. One of our major benefits is Aspire Plus. We've noticed that this will allow you to capture all the good work you're already doing, as well as give you a bit of insight into what you could be potentially doing a little bit better as well. So we can see on the right-hand side, there's an Aspire Plus impact certificate. This will give you an oversight of exactly what you've saved, what the resource was, obviously what the revenue savings was as well, the tons in transaction, and like we mentioned as well, it's aligned with all your SDGs. So you'll see those down the bottom there. So you can pull this report monthly, and it showcases obviously your sustainability efforts. You can benchmark your organization scope 3 emissions. You can measure your circularity activities, like we said, with reuse, repurposing, recycling. And the biggest impact is obviously, measuring projects and monitoring their success over time. So a very, very cool tool and something that's very impactful to a lot of local businesses. We're B Corp certified, and we're also a social enterprise as well. So something that we've just added another notch to our belt, and something that we're really wanting to align with within our partnership space as well. Here's a little case study. So one of our enterprise customers in the fin year of 2022-23 actually saved over $1.2 million. They, in this time, onboarded over 115 staff, and they've had over 2,000 staff use the platform. So with Aspire, it is a long-term strategy, and we're in it, to create sustained change. So they've been a customer with us for 4 years, and they've really adopted the principles of Aspire and circularity. They've added over 300 supply and value chains since joining as well, which has allowed them to then divert, nearly 6,000 tonnes of landfill from being dumped. They've also exchanged over 490 resources, and as you can see, there's about 2,500 tonnes in emission saving there as well, which collectively has led to over $2 million saving in the 4-year period. So that's one of many happy customers and one of our many users that are on the platform. So just thought we'd highlight that. One of the big things, obviously, we're talking to, and that is coming very prevalently, is the mandatory climate-related financial disclosure. So this is something that is obviously legislated, and it's coming very soon. So as you can see on the left-hand side, there's a little bit of an image, and I like to give credit to Elise Natali on this. She's done a wonderful job on this image, and it encapsulates it very succinctly. So basically, the mandatory climate scenarios are that there's a bill that's been passed that's enforceable by law. So if you look at the Section 3, you'll see the different groupings depending on which business you are, whether you're on a 500 million plus consolidated revenue, then it drops down to 200, and then obviously to 50 and so forth, and how the reporting entities meet those criteria. And the most important thing is when that is enacted. So you'll see in the fourth component that Group 1 is January 2025, Group 2 is July 2026, and then Group 3 is July 2027. So something that is going to be legislated, is going to be mandated. So yeah, obviously we'd love to be a part of this process to make sure you're hedged against this, and of course doing the right thing by the environment as well. I guess that leads into the Q&A, and that's it from me. Cam, if there's anything else you'd like to add, please go for it.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, just to sort of supplement what Neil said, they did a great job talking through that. It's actually, it's good to sort of hear a different point of view instead of hearing myself talking all the time. But even speaking about that case study, which you spoke obviously really high level about, I can go a little bit more depth into that. Is actually the organisation since inception, I think they've just done over 5,000 tonnes. That document doesn't say that, but 5,000 tonnes of carbon avoided through Aspire by measurement. So that's that's a testament to them, the hard work they're doing. But again, obviously those figures are from end of last financial, not this one. So we're working obviously on a new one. But again, it's sort of like when it comes to Aspire and adopting it, it's not like a switch on, switch off action. It's all about how they can. It's all about how they can sort of have those learnings, adopt those principles, and move forward. So yeah, it's really good, and thanks Niels for explaining that. But what I want to do now is I want to go through some of the chat. We've had some good questions come through. I'll just go from the top. Emily, for sure. What we'll do after this meeting is we will share. We'll share a link to the people that attended with the document, with the presentation as well as the recording. So you can feel free to do what you wish off the back of that, but please share. And then basically I'll go to the next one. This is from MM. I'm not quite sure who MM is, but however, what are the accredited, so this is something that goes to you, Roger. What are the accredited platforms to buy and sell carbon cancellation certificates? This is not my area. This is, I've got no idea, but over to you, Roger. Can you explain?
Okay, thanks for the question. So the markets that we operate in are markets that have a government-regulated emissions trading system. It's called a cap-and-trade system or an emissions trading scheme. Globally, these systems cover about 25% of emissions. The biggest scheme is in Europe. Then there are schemes in America and Canada. There are schemes in the UK, in New Zealand. There isn't a proper cap and trade scheme in Australia. So at the moment we're active we use the New Zealand allowances, we use the UK allowances, and we operate on two premises. One is there's academic work to say a ton of carbon in the atmosphere is a ton of carbon. When you get away from the local ground effects, a ton of carbon is a ton of carbon, doesn't matter where it's been emitted, it mixes in the atmosphere. And The second thing is we only operate in markets that have a regulated system, that have a transparent register, which means you can look into the register independently and see that what we tell you we're doing, and one that has a transparent price. So there's no hiding behind price gouging or obfuscation.
Yeah, lovely. And that's obviously for anyone in one of those markets, you can buy those cancellation.
Well, generally,
adopt that.
Sorry, just to give you a bit more detail. So the underlying allowances themselves are regulated financial products, which means you need to be set up as an institutional participant to access those markets, and the transactions are normally done in thousands of tons of carbon, which is a lot more than most businesses work. So what we've done is we've got a structure which turns that regulated financial product into a non-financial product that can be sold to businesses, and we've also got the ability to cut it into arbitrary size right down to kilograms and grams, so you don't have to buy the thousands of tons that the big polluters end up buying.
Yeah, lovely. No, that's great. Obviously, bite-sized chunks, as you said earlier, that's really important. I will go to the next one from Mario. I know you did touch on this, but you might want to go a little bit in depth, Roger. This one's all to you. How do you track this cancellation in practice? How do you ensure the emissions are actually stopped?
So again, there's a lot of stuff around this, but basically we track the cancellation because we operate in regulated systems that have an open and transparent register, so you can actually see every single transaction. And I had one of the slides where I showed you on the left was what it looks like in our ecosystem, and the right was the registry certificate, if you like. That's if you went in independently, you could get a copy of that certificate. So that ensures that the allowances and the transactions are actually there. Then in each jurisdiction, the regulator sets enforceable regimes where the biggest polluters are forced. They don't have a choice. They have to buy these allowances and they have to actually stop them. And I can see the next. There has been, these systems have been operating for about 15 years, especially in Europe, which is the biggest one. A large study was done last year, which I can find a link to, which actually showed that with the system and the fact that polluters had to pay, there was actually a noticeable and tangible and substantial difference in the emissions or in the reduction of emissions. And there is if you're paying whatever it is, 50 euros or 80 euros a ton of carbon to pollute, if you can spend less than that innovating and moving towards sustainability, that makes business sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And another one here from me, a lady who just answered that last question. Are the schemes VCS approved? Do you know of?
When you say, sorry, VCS, I'm not sure what the...
Yeah, that's all right. That was one of the comments from Mia, but that's all right.
Sorry, Mia, I'm not sure what VCS is, so I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Yeah, that's no problem. That's no problem.
I think the schemes are government regulated, and but I don't know the specifics of VCS.
Yeah, that's all right. We'll ask some clarification, and we'll come back to it. But the next one, this one's from Joe. Are the carbon avoidance certificates on Aspire Plus created by C2Zero? I'll answer that one. No, they're not. The Aspire Plus, the impact certificates, they're ISO verified. We work with a third party that verifies those embodied carbon values that we actually pull through an API into Aspire. So it's not. It'd be a good way to actually have a look at that, Roger. Thanks, Joe, for that hint. We might have a look at that, as a part of the partnership moving forward. But we're always up to look at different ways how we can sort of create value off the platform and what we need to do. I'll go to the next one. Sorry, back to Mia's. VCS stands for Verified Carbon Standard with Vera.
Okay, sorry, I can talk to that because I do know about Verra. So even though it's verified carbon standard, Verra is not a government or a regulator. They're a self-certification body that does have a standard for certify. They're one of the biggest carbon certifiers. They certify carbon credits, which are created by projects. So you can plant trees, you can do renewable energy and things like that. They're one of the largest of those independent self-regulatory organisations, but they're so the allowances we use are actually government regulated, and they're regulated financial products with a fiduciary duty around them and enforcement and penalties if you don't comply.
No problems. No,
I would
that's
argue
fair enough.
it's a stronger and more stringent verification.
Because there's Verra and Gold Standard, right? So they're
there's Verra, there's
working
Gold
different.
Standard. I think there's like 76 different accreditors at the moment. The United Nations, some of which have become quite embroiled in greenwashing, and so to the detriment of the ones that haven't.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. That's all right. We'll go to the next question we've got here from Caroline King. Question for you, Roger. Are there examples of data showing big polluters have reduced emissions as a result of carbon cancellations, or they just find another way around it?
So as I mentioned before, there is an enforcement and penalty regime if they do not comply. But the biggest study that's verified that these emissions allowances work was done over the European scheme last year. I can find a link to it and share it with you after this seminar. So but the answer is yes, they absolutely do work, and it's very, very difficult. You would have to be negligent if you're meant to operate in the scheme and you don't comply.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't want that, right? We don't want any of that greenwash. We want to make sure we keep the credibility with what's already happening, which is very important. I'll move on to the next question. This one, almost both for like Niels and probably myself, but Niels, I'll let you sort of answer it. You mentioned on one of the slides that Spy handles reuse, repurpose, and obviously recycling and reduction, like all pretty much the 7 Rs we sort of touch on. There is a use case of partners in repair, remanufacturing, and refurbishment options. Also a related question. Actually, I'll get to the next question, but answer that, and I'll get to the next one.
Yes, yeah, short story long, yeah, to answer that is yes, absolutely. So there is a case for repair, remanufacture and refurbishment, and definitely a big part of what we do. So we enable those connections for people to facilitate that, and then we capture all the data around that. So that's a large part of why we're partnering, because we have large partners that do exactly that would align with us, and we're also opening up another arm of the business where we sort of facilitate it in the sense of transporting it and housing it potentially, and looking at a consultancy option in which we can sort of oversee the best practice of how that can take place. So yeah, if you did want some more advice on that, I'd definitely suggest reaching out to either Cam or myself, and then we can get a bit more granular with how we do that. But yes, definitely something we offer, and we've got multiple partners that do that as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and exactly right, Niels. And a few of the things that we're actually looking at the moment are quite important. Is we've got a lot of sort of feedback or advice or just some questions from a lot of our users, and sometimes when it comes to that transaction aspect, sometimes the transportation or that storage is obviously a barrier, as everyone sort of knows. And we're actually doing a couple of pilots at the moment. It's a really important around obviously working on that transportation aspect from going from business A to business B, but also too, obviously there's logistical issues around timing that we're actually looking at the moment regarding warehousing or actually holding onto the goods for a certain period. But also we try to, be flexible with how the user wants to use it, both supply and demand, especially obviously if the asset is a particular user's and they just got to get offsite for a little while. So we're looking at different options like that. But as what was sort of Niels do is we're pretty flexible how the platform works. We have a lot of our customers, or majority of them, come to us first, and we also work with them for, a period of time, might be 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, and actually work out exactly where to almost do like a gap analysis in what they're trying to achieve. And we use our networks, and over 4,000, or I think it's 4,500 businesses we've got now that use the platform. And what we do is we sort of connect the dots between them and use the platform as that, that measurement tool to help them with that resourcing, and also to that certification around it. So if any questions, you can reach out to us after it. But yeah, I'll go to the next question here from Joe. Related question, actually, is the Aspire marketplace used for other materials outside the 200 that is supported by the platform? Good question. So I'll answer this on a high level. So we've got 15 pretty much categories at the moment. They go from anything from C&D, organics, new items, you name it. But every single one of those, overall, there's about 200 different commodities that we use, and every single one of them, I think, is about 5 different variants, right? So we've got about 1,000 different ways or different items that you can put on the platform. I don't think we have not found a home or a way that we can catalog that asset into the platform. I don't think we've actually had one that's come in, or we haven't been able to categorize it. So, but we're also up for new suggestions, even just to streamline. So we're actually working with a viticulture organisation at the moment. Like they've got a lot of wineries within their region, and basically they've got some very unique streams, or it's a lot easier to categorize it as one asset. So, we're trying to work with them to see how we can do that. But also too, one of the features with Aspire is basically, if you actually know the material breakdown, you can actually put that into the platform. So if you think about it as just a high level, as a desk, as an example, I know the one I'm at the moment, it's probably about 70% timber, laminate timber, probably about 20% metal or steel for the legs, some plastic, and some paint. So if you actually know that breakdown, that EPD information, you can actually put it into it. So you can actually help with that matching and that carbon emissions avoidance off the top of it. So we do that. It's just all about how we can sort of work with the customer with what information they've got, so we can actually hit those targets. I'll go to some more questions. Sally McDonald, would it be viable for a small business to use the platform as a small suited for large enterprise? We have a bulk amount of waste exchange. Well, I'll hand that one over to Niels. Niels can answer that. So,
yeah, look, and with it, we actually founded the company and really focused on small to medium enterprise. So absolutely, we can cater for small business, and that's what we do on the daily. So the large part of what we do is we have local government subscriptions, which then enable small business to have access or subscription to our software, and then facilitate those exchanges. So the small business isn't footing the bill, but can still access the platform and facilitate those resource exchanges, like you mentioned. But we also can customize, bespoke, tailor it to large enterprise as well. So we work a lot with state and federal government and large multinationals on various projects, which we then have to customize that out, tailor it out, work with various suppliers, contractors, inventory, and so forth as well. And then we can white label it and make it look and feel like theirs. So yeah, to answer that, we can definitely do both. And that's what our team do on the daily. They're constantly speaking with customers, talking to local business. I'm on the road meeting with the businesses to, help them post on board, make sure that they are exchanging and they're interacting with local businesses. And we also have, people on the ground that will go to sort of make those introductions, so that we can connect you up and facilitate that exchange and relationship as well. So yeah, definitely can help there.
Yeah, perfect. And also too, Sally, like the way sort of Aspire works, we've got sort of a different sort of business models. So one of the main ways is we might get a big enterprise customer that will join. They might have, 7,000 staff or whatever, doesn't really matter. But basically how that works, it all comes around the support, and we actually work with the organisation to see how the best ways for them to adopt Aspire. But a part of their subscription, or sometimes or most of the time, they can actually bring their value chain or supply chain into their network, so they can actually manage the resources across that, right? So it goes from point A to point B within a network or within their ecosystem. We can do that. But what that does, it also allows that business to play into the Aspire network, right? It allows them to play. So or to use it. It's almost subsidises it. And then what that does, it allows that enterprise to be a thought leader in the process and to bring their, their supply chain value chain into the organisation or onto their circular journey, so to speak. Like we're onboarding a customer at the moment that I think it's almost like a sporting club or sporting organisation, and they've got about 7,000 like localized clubs within that region or within their network. So we're working with them, one, to use the platform, see how we can best help them, but also supply it to those clubs that are a part of it. So we're looking at different ways to do it, but what we do is, a lot of that comes a part of that exploration sort of period at the start, where we sit there, we go, okay, let's work together. And we actually come into the organisation and see, okay, what are the low-hanging fruit? What does the come regarding behaviour change? How do we sort of come and educate your network? So we do little things around that, and over a period of time of working together, we can actually work out the best way for you guys to use Aspire or so forth. So it all varies. Every customer is slightly different. As Neil said, we work a lot with local governments, which is great, but I've never met two local governments are the same. They're always a little bit different in the way that they operate. So, we've got to be agile when it comes to that. And as Neil said, we've worked with, I think we've got well over 32 now, mate. I can't remember. I just sort of lose a bit track of how many we've got. But again, they all use it a little bit differently, and the way they want to approach it's a bit different. And a lot of it comes down to the resourcing at the end of the day. We work with some really large governmental clients that are really well resourced and educated internally, and they're really on their way to circularity, where we've got others who are each taking their first step. Or the resourcing internally is a little bit reduced. So we work with them to see what we can do and how can we adopt. So again, it all sort of shifts, it all sort of moves around that. We've got another question here from Mia. I think this is for you, Roger. Are there carbon cancellation insurance that supports both forward financing of carbon projects and the risk associated with use credits? How does C2Zero work, align, or integrate such financial products to support the carbon validation event?
Yeah, thanks. So the regulated emissions market has both a spot and a forward market, which is run by some of the the banks and the brokers, and it's a professional institutional market. So if you're at the big end, you can operate in that market to both manage your spot risk, your forward risk, and you can also get financing for allowances. However, because these are not carbon credits or offsets, there is no, they don't work as on a project. So on a traditional offset, and I'll use trees for an example, if you buy carbon credits that are linked to forestry, you need to have some sort of insurance around that product because the impact of those trees is ongoing. So if those trees burn down or something happens, that just completely negates the effect of your carbon credit. Whereas emissions allowances are more like a permit system. So you have a finite pool. Let's say there were 100 emissions allowances. Polluters would be able to emit 100 units of pollution. If we buy 10 of those and cancel them without polluting, there's only 90 left for the polluters. So that impact is basically immediate. As soon as we take allowances out of the system, those are allowances that polluters cannot use to pollute. And the way our business is structured, we buy the allowances, they move into a bankruptcy remote trust, which has rules set that the allowances can never go back into the system. So, and that's all transparent and auditable. So as soon as we buy and put allowances into the trust, they will never be used. So you don't need insurance for the forward impact as you would with the carbon credit, and then you can manage using the markets if you need to manage your risk for this year or next year or into the future. That's available. I hope that's answered the question.
No, it's great, Roger. And what I might do after this meeting is I might actually do an introduction email with Roger, so you can actually ask some more questions or some more in-depth ones if you wish. Very knowledgeable. So yeah, I will. Yeah, I'll put you guys together.
Very happy to do.
Yeah, as we've got a few minutes to go, I will share my screen and we will continue. So one thing, as I sort of said earlier, is this meeting with Roger and this webinar, it's a part of a series that we're kicking off regarding partnerships, right? One of the things, when it comes to circular economy and sustainability, it's all about, working as a collaborative group and how we can sort of move towards a circular economy and decarbonisation, sustainability. Well, one thing that we've found is really important is, through conversations for the last few years, is how we should be leveraging our partnership partners more, celebrating them more, having organisations like Roger and the cool stuff that they're doing, some awesome questions. I really enjoyed, the first conversations when it came to that, when we first engaged. So, I think it's really important that we keep going with that. But what I'd like to do is share now. Let me know when you can see this. And what I want to do is announce, obviously, a save the date for our next webinar on November the 2nd with Ratio Consultants. So Ratio Consultants are an Australian-wide consultancy firm. They do a lot in the construction space. And I'm not going to sort of burst their bubble or what they do. I'll probably put them, I probably won't do a justification of some of the cool stuff that they do. But we're speaking with a guy called Damien from Ratio. Obviously, it's kicking off on November the 2nd. So we're going to be doing these once a month. Obviously, we'll be breaking over the Christmas break because everyone will be away, or hopefully they should be away. So yeah, we'll give everyone that time, and we'll be reconnecting back into the year. But we've got one in November. We're going to kick off one in early December. Still up in the air with exactly who we're going to do with that. Obviously, it's a fair few months into the future, and obviously close to Christmas. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, again, Ratio is going to be the next one. You'll start seeing some comms in about 2 weeks for that. So obviously save the date, be the same time, 12 to 1 on the 2nd. So please make a note of that. And again, so on behalf of Aspire, I'll let Roger talk if he wishes, but I'd like to thank you for making the time today. Obviously your lunch break, listening to the first of these series. Again, Roger, thank you very much for making the time. We worked quite closely on getting this together, and I think it's gone quite well. But again, thank you very much for your time, Roger. And thank you everyone for attending.
Thanks, Cameron, and thanks everyone.
Thank you, guys. And enjoy the rest of your lunch break. And Niels, do you want to say something before we go?
Yeah, and obviously, yeah, thank you to Roger. Thank you to you for moderating too, Cam. And like we spoke to, yeah, if anyone wants further information, please scan those QR codes, reach out to me directly. I'm more than happy to pick up a conversation. And we do have an array of various partnership options and relationships that we're garnering. So more than happy to pick that conversation up post this webinar.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next one. If not beforehand, please reach out if you've got any questions. Thank you, team.
Thanks, team. Have a good afternoon. Bye.